What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 3 and Out YouTube page. I'm John Middlekauff, and we are talking football all day, every day. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends. Let's roll, baby. Okay, Middlekauff Mailbag time. You guys know the drill. At John Middlekauff, fire in those DMs. Get your question answered here on the show. From my guy Caesar. Long time. Big fan. With Davante requesting a trade and Raiders shopping him around, by the time you're listening to this, he might be on a different team. Wouldn't it make sense to see what the Jets would give up? Maybe even throw in Reddick? Pair him with Crosby and Wilkins? Seems like all parties win. I think if you're the Raiders, and I saw Albert Breer, if you factor in age and recent form, now part of his recent form is because of the quarterback situation. I think he's a better player right now than Keenan Allen. But Keenan, I think, went for a fourth. Obviously, big salaries too. That'd be tough to stomach. Now, would you rather have Reddick and a fourth, or just try to get the desperation out of the Jets and hope to get like a third that turns into a conditional second? Like the thing with Reddick, do you want to pay him and then just go all in on your defensive line? You still need draft capital to try to get a quarterback. So now, could you sign Sam Darnold this offseason? Flacco, maybe? I don't know. I think it's complicated. I think if you're trading him, you're not really looking for a player, would be my thing. You want draft picks. It's about the big picture. I'm sure if you've gotten this question from another Niners fan already, but would you trade BA for a second? BA and a second for Davante Adams? Well, you can't now because they just paid him a huge signing bonus. So once you sign a contract like Brandon, I almost said Brandon Ingram, Brandon Aiyuk is going to be on the night. He's not a tradable player. So this is where I think the mistake the Niners made, if they could do it all over again, do you know what they would have done? They would have traded Brandon Aiyuk before the draft. Even if they got a second and a third, trade him to the Steelers, use those picks, trade them wherever, and use that capital to get players. You're watching the team, you're like, do they even need them? Ricky Pearsall is going to come back. Jawan Jennings is a stud. Debo's playing. Kittle's out there. I wonder if they'd like to have that one back. I was watching your videos of places Davante could go. I know it's a long shot, but this division has been struggling near the top, and this seems to be a star young quarterback. Why do the Commanders not try to get Adams with Scary Terry to form a 1-2 punch? Add McCaffrey in there too. He looks pretty good. The best DBs are in the AFC, and these two wide receivers helping Daniels. I think this could be a really intriguing fit. Honestly, the first thing that jumped out to me was, if you are the Commanders and no one else is willing to go like very high, would you offer a couple thirds and give Davante an extension? Like trade for him and give him like a 2-year, $60 million extension? Because part of having the young quarterback, the value in that is being able to acquire a guy like that and pay some money. Who else are you paying? Now, obviously, you can't. I think even a second's still pretty risky because those picks are pretty valuable. But I think that Adam Peters and Dan Quinn are having a long conversation right now. Because I would have to think long and hard about it, depending on what the compensation was. And then immediately extend them. And then you get Davante with Scary Terry and Brian Robinson. That's a pretty good offense. Hey, John. From Washington. It's a city in Washington I can't even pretend to pronounce. I was lucky to be able to witness the LOB days. Same. It was sweet. But no one seems to talk about my favorite running back, Marshawn Lynch. My question is, do you think that Beast Mode is a Hall of Famer? Why or why not? I think he's definitely a Hall of Fame talent. I think it's based on longevity. Super Bowl champion, probably could have 2. I mean, was clearly a top, I would say, 3 running back for a long, 4 or 5 year period of his career. Honestly, I haven't thought that long and hard about it. My first reaction is, yeah, I could see him get in. I don't know if he's not like Adrian Peterson or LaDainian Tomlinson, But I think when you factor in winning, when you factor in his peak years, though, it's kind of rocky in Buffalo, goes to Seattle. So yeah, I have no beef with it. First question: with primetime being such a great figure in football, but also being there for his kids and his quarterback being forecasted to go first round, maybe top 10, would an owner, GM, and coaching staff draft him knowing how much influence media would be part of possibly with Sanders' coaching career and his son being coached in the NFL, questioning coaching decisions or where he goes, knowing owners like being in control of their franchise? Working for the Eagles, knowing how owners like to run the franchise, can you give insight? How would team handle this from the front office to the field coaching staff? It's too early to see which teams will finish at the top of the draft. Bonus question: how do you think Major League Baseball would be better if they had a hard cap? I don't even care. I don't think it matters in baseball in terms of the cap. Same teams would be winning. And if you're a poverty franchise right now, I don't feel bad for you. I would say with Deion's son, I think you'd have to take into account, like when Deion was drafted, there was a lot of hoopla behind him. Now, he was, probably a top 50 prospect of all time, any sport. He's one of the greatest talents we've ever seen. Obviously, could play baseball too. But his dad wasn't also a head coach and have a huge media platform. And listen, Deion doesn't give a shit. So I hadn't even thought about that angle of it. But yeah, he was going to say some stuff that makes headlines. So if you're the Giants, right, if you're a big, big market team, everything Deion says about Shedeur would become a headline. But I don't think you can be consumed with that. If Shedeur is the best talent and, the highest graded guy on your board, I think teams would just pull the trigger and deal with that later. I've never had a conversation with an owner. I honestly, I think some owners might like it, to be honest with you. It just puts a spotlight on their franchise. What I don't understand, we've seen two high-level running backs, Saquon and Josh Jacobs, recently sign with the team and then come out and say the team playing on real grass versus artificial turf factored into their decision to go there. So clearly players at the top are taking notice of playing surfaces, giving teams a competitive advantage in free agency. So why don't more teams rip out their turf and put in grass in order to give themselves a better chance to land themselves the next Saquon in free agency? I think that's a sexy headline, but how many teams were truly in the market for those two guys? I think it'd be a bigger deal if the number one defensive player made a decision because of that. At the end of the day, the markets for the running backs are relatively small. I think it just gets down to money, and these owners are cheap. It's crazy to say, but it's really that simple. It's why do the Giants and the Jets play on the shitty turf? Because they don't want to replace it. Because it would cost them, which is insane to me. It's you guys both have $200 million payrolls. We just saw Rodgers tear his Achilles there last year. A ton of guys have torn their Achilles on other teams or ACLs at that place. What are we doing, guys? But it hasn't changed, and I don't expect it to. It's crazy to say this out loud, but I do just think it's just they're cheap. I love touchdowns. Tutties, taking it to the house, in for 6. I call them tugs. Whenever you call a touchdown, one thing's for sure. Touchdowns matter more at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. On the ground, in the air, special teams or defense, we do not care how they score them. We want to bet on touchdowns. And DraftKings Sportsbook is delivering. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something as simple like picking a player to score a touchdown or how many touchdowns will be in a game. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. Ready to do a touchdown dance on your own? New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the number one place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use the code JOHN, John. That's code JOHN. New customers get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Question for the mailbag. This will be the last one. Do you think the Eagles regret going all in on Jalen Hurts? Every time I watch him, he does not look in command of the offense, and like the game plan is trying to work around his limitations. I think it's easy. Obviously, if they could do it over again, sitting here today, they would take back the contract in a heartbeat. They would just take back the contract. But at the time they signed him, he had just looked better than Mahomes in the Super Bowl. So these last couple of years, I mean, the year and 4 games have been rocky, especially the last I would say calendar year, but November, December, playoff game, and the start of the season. He's pretty up and down, a lot of down. Turnovers are not going away. But when they pulled the trigger on the deal, he had just been an MVP candidate. He had looked incredible in the Super Bowl. I mean, probably just his best pocket game of his career. In the biggest moments against the brightest lights, you just kind of bet, even if he wasn't going to play like that every week, that it would just sustain. They clearly underestimated what the team would look like minus the offensive coordinator. And they underestimated that for whatever reason, maybe he just, I don't know, let it all hang that game. Because he, like you said, just doesn't look in command. There's an eye test thing. Like you watch Trevor Lawrence, it doesn't feel like he knows where the ball's going. He's not a confident thrower. But he'll throw within the pocket. When you watch Jalen or you watch Deshaun Watson, Jalen's better than Deshaun Watson. Both those guys leave the pocket early. And both those guys are inconsistent pocket throwers. Now, Jalen is still much more capable scrambling around, making shit happen, making big plays. But if you can't consistently win from within the pocket, I'd argue impossible to live up to your contract. Say what you want about Lamar, and you guys know I'm critical of him sometimes. When he's on, he's kicking your ass, moving around between the tackles, throwing balls. Very accurate. Jalen just doesn't have those moments very often anymore. Deshaun never does. So I don't know. There's just a ton of pressure right now on Kellen to try to just get the best football out of him. And because even if they do regret it, and I'm sure they do, you're kind of in bed with this guy. You got to figure this out. You don't have other options. Because at the time, when Carson started to crumble and they went to Jalen, like Jalen was on their team. 2nd round pick. Kenny Pickett's their backup. So even if like, hey, this is getting really ugly, there are no better options. You're either going to lose with Jalen or you're going to figure it out and kind of save the season. Also, in fairness to him, the defense in Vic Fangio has been atrocious. I think one thing they immediately regret is the Huff deal. He doesn't make sense with Fangio. That much is clear through 4 weeks. Makes no sense. Heard someone say he played 33 snaps and made 1 tackle. His stats compared to Reddick, who hasn't even played, are kind of similar. And scheme fit matters. What's Robert Saleh? It's a much different defense. It's a much different defense than what Fangio needs. Like his number one, I would say, thing that he asks, it feels like, is for his defensive lineman to hold the point. And that's not Huff's deal. He's a nickel pass rusher. Well, if you start him and he's out there on first down, what are you going to do? You're going to run right at him. And obviously the 2 big guys have overall underperformed. So I draft 2 defensive linemen in the top 15. It's part of football, though. Like, you regret things. I was watching Kyle Hamilton Sunday night. It's like, you realize that the Eagles traded up to get Jordan Davis, and they could have just drafted Kyle Hamilton in that spot, but they took Jordan Davis, which, listen, you take a 6'5", 350-pound defensive tackle over a safety. It's not crazy business. But then that guy needs to be good. Because I'm watching Kyle Hamilton. It's like, this guy a Hall of Famer? And the question with Jordan Davis, like, how much does he love football? I mean, You're asking those questions 3 years into a guy's career. How much does he love football? Because I promise you, that is the question being asked. We got problems. And by we, I mean Sirianni, because and Fangio. You need those guys to be good. So I'd say the Eagles got to this bye week. They got to figure out their defensive line. They got to figure out their defense, and they got to just figure out how to get Jalen comfortable again. Obviously, he's going to look better with AJ Brown out there and Devontae Smith, but he still should be able to be pretty, efficient when you're paying a guy $45-50 million a year. And that's on Kellen Moore. That's why he gets paid a lot of money, a lot of pressure.